Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, where we bring you the most shocking, untold stories of Hollywood's past. From glamour to scandal, fame to deception. Today, we're uncovering 20 golden age celebrity marriages that were complete shams. And why? These picture-perfect weddings may have dazzled the public, but behind the scenes, they were anything but romantic. From secret affairs to studio-arranged marriages, Hollywood's golden age was full of love stories that weren't what they seemed. Stay tuned as we reveal the truth behind the biggest celebrity I-dos that were all for show. Before we dive in, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a deep dive into entertainment's biggest secrets. Alright, let's get started with our first shocking Hollywood marriage. 1. Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates, 1955 to 1958. A marriage built on secrets. The cameras flashed as Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates stepped out of the church, hand in hand, the picture of newlywed bliss. The press called it the romance of the decade. Hollywood's most eligible bachelor finally settling down. But beneath the dazzling smiles and made-for-magazine wedding photos, a different story unfolded. Phyllis had been Henry Wilson's secretary, Rock's agent, and the man responsible for making him a superstar. She had always admired Rock, and when he asked her to dinner, she felt like she had stepped into a dream. But the dream had cracks. In Hollywood, whispers were dangerous, and there had been too many about Rock. The studios couldn't afford their leading man's reputation to be tarnished, so a wedding was the perfect solution. A wife would silence the rumors, at least for a while. At first, Phyllis convinced herself it was real. Rock was kind, charming, and she hoped that in time they could grow into love. But as the months passed, the distance between them widened. He was often away, surrounded by his close circle of bachelor friends. Late at night she would lie awake, wondering why he never truly looked at her the way a husband should. One evening she confronted him. "Rock, are you happy with me?" His jaw tightened. He hesitated. "I care about you, Phyllis. But do you love me?" A long silence. Then finally a sigh. "Not the way you want me to." She knew then. Maybe she had always known. The marriage ended quietly in 1958, with little fanfare. Just another Hollywood contract fulfilled and expired. Rock went on to become one of the most beloved actors of his time, but his true self remained hidden from the world for decades. And Phyllis? She faded from the spotlight, carrying with her the truth of a marriage that had been a role neither of them had truly wanted to play. 2. Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli, 1945 to 1951. Sham reason, studio pressure, rumors of Minnelli's homosexuality. The wedding was picture-perfect, orchestrated like one of Judy's musical numbers, a grand spectacle for the fans and the press. MGM's Golden Girl, fresh from Meet Me in St. Louis, had found her prince in its brilliant director, Vincente Minnelli. At first, Judy believed in the fairy tale. Vincente admired her talent, spoke to her like she was more than just a studio product. She found comfort in his soft voice and artistic vision. But comfort is not love. The whispers started almost immediately. Late nights at the studio, male companions who lingered too long, a certain lack of passion between them. But MGM needed its star married. And Judy, fragile from years of control, obeyed. The first years were tolerable. They had a daughter, Liza, and for a moment the illusion felt real. But the loneliness grew unbearable. Judy was spiraling, pills, breakdowns, paranoia. And Vincente? He was gone more often than not, consumed by his work and private escapades. One night, Judy confronted him. "Do you even love me?" Her voice was hoarse, her hands shaking from the pills MGM had prescribed to keep her going. Vincente hesitated. Then with a sad smile he said, "I love you, Judy. Just, not in the way you deserve." By 1951 the marriage was over. Judy left, her heart broken but her chains loosened. Vincente moved on, his private life still carefully guarded by Hollywood's invisible hand. And MGM. It kept selling the fantasy, long after the truth had faded into the shadows. 3. Rudolph Valentino and Jean Acker, 1919 to 1921. Sham reason. Both were suspected to be in same-sex relationships. The wedding was supposed to be a dream. Rudolph Valentino, the dashing Italian heartthrob, and Jean Acker, the glamorous silent film actress, had only known each other for a few months. Their whirlwind romance seemed like the perfect Hollywood love story. But on the night of their wedding, as Valentino approached the honeymoon suite with a nervous smile, Jean slammed the door in his face. The click of the lock echoed in the empty hallway. "Jean!" He knocked, then knocked again. "Let me in." Silence. Inside the room, Jean sat on the bed, staring at the wedding ring on her finger. She had made a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. She had agreed to this marriage, believing she could change, that she could love a man the way society expected her to. But she couldn't. Rudolph stood outside for what felt like hours before finally giving up. He spent his wedding night alone. The next morning, Jean left. The marriage, if it had ever truly existed, was over. For months, the public saw Valentino as the heartbroken husband, the abandoned lover. But behind the scenes, Hollywood insiders whispered that the marriage had been a cover, a desperate attempt to hide the truths both actors feared the world would never accept. The divorce came quickly, and both moved on. Jean returned to her quiet affairs with women, while Valentino, still burdened by rumors about his own love life, would later enter another troubled marriage. In the end, their union was nothing more than a Hollywood illusion, one of many crafted to keep the cameras flashing and the scandals at bay. 4. Rudolph Valentino and Natacha Rambova, 1923 to 1925. Sham reason. A marriage of convenience, complicated by legal issues and studio control. Rudolph Valentino paced the room, frustration etched across his face. He had been in love before. Passionate, reckless love, but this was something else. Natacha Rambova was brilliant, ambitious, and as dramatic as any of the films she designed costumes for. They had fallen for each other in a whirlwind romance, but passion wasn't enough in Hollywood, where every move was scrutinized. Their first marriage was a scandal, literally illegal. The ink had barely dried on Valentino's divorce from Jean Acker, making his union with Natacha invalid. The headlines screamed of impropriety, and the studios weren't pleased. To salvage his reputation, Valentino was forced into a humiliating period of celibacy before he could legally marry her again. But even after the legalities were settled, their love was overshadowed by control. Natacha wanted power, influence over his career. She pushed him to take artistic risks, but the studios pushed back. "She's ruining you," the executives warned him. The fights grew bitter. "I made you, Rudy," she spat one evening, her voice sharp. "Without me, you're just another pretty face." Valentino stared at her, something breaking inside him. He had spent years being told what to do. By studios, by agents, by the press. And now, even by the woman who had once claimed to love him. One day he simply left. No grand fight, no dramatic goodbye. Just silence. By 1925, the marriage was over. Valentino was free. But only for a while. A year later he would be gone, dead at just 31. At his funeral, Natacha was nowhere to be seen. Their marriage had been a performance, a carefully orchestrated illusion, just like so many Hollywood love stories before and after. 5. Marlene Dietrich and Rudolf Sieber, 1923 to 1976. Sham reason. An open marriage. Both had affairs with men and women. The wedding was small, almost forgettable. Marlene Dietrich, just 21, wore a simple dress, her lips curled in a knowing smile. Rudolf Sieber, her groom, held her hand tightly, but even then she was already looking beyond him. They had love once, youthful, passionate but fleeting. As the years passed, the rules of their marriage became clear. They would stay together for the sake of appearances, but love? Love would be found elsewhere. Marlene became a Hollywood icon, captivating audiences with her smoky voice and smoldering presence. She took lovers, men and women, politicians, poets, and fellow actors. Her affairs were whispered about in the elite circles of Hollywood and Paris, yet she never left Rudolph. Rudolph, for his part, settled into quiet domesticity in France with another woman, raising their daughter while Marlene dazzled the world. "Why don't you divorce?" a journalist once asked her. Marlene chuckled, lighting a cigarette. "Darling," she purred, "Rudolph is my husband. My lovers. Well, that's another story." For over 50 years they remained legally married, bound not by love but by convenience, understanding, and an unspoken agreement. Marriage was just a word. Freedom was everything. 6. Tallulah Bankhead and John Emery, 1937 to 1941. Sham Reason, a cover for Bankhead's bisexuality and a temporary attempt at conventionality. The wedding was everything Hollywood expected, elegant, grand, and overflowing with champagne. Tallulah Bankhead, the scandalous, outspoken Southern belle, had married the dashing John Emery, a respectable stage actor. The newspapers called it a match of passion and sophistication. Behind the scenes, Tallulah rolled her eyes at the entire affair. "Marriage? Darling, I'm as suited for that as a cat is for swimming," she had joked to friends before saying, "I do." But pressure from family and industry whispers had finally worn her down. Maybe, just maybe, she could play the role of a devoted wife for a while. John, on the other hand, hoped she would settle. He admired her talent, her beauty, perhaps even loved her. But the truth was, Tallulah's heart was never meant for just one person, let alone one man. At first, the marriage was bearable. They attended parties arm in arm, played the charming couple for the press. But when the cameras weren't flashing, Tallulah stayed out late, her whiskey glass always full, her laughter ringing through underground clubs where she was free to be herself. John grew tired of the rumors, the endless nights spent alone. "Do you even care about this marriage?" he finally asked her one evening, his voice tight with frustration. Tallulah, lounging in silk pajamas, lit a cigarette and exhaled slowly. "Darling," she purred, "I care about a great many things. But monogamy isn't one of them." By 1941 the divorce was final. Tallulah shrugged it off with her usual wit. "You can say this about me," she later quipped. "I've tried everything once, twice if I liked it." John moved on. Tallulah remained a legend. And Hollywood kept telling love stories that weren't real. 7. Cary Grant and Virginia Cherrill, 1934 to 1935. Sham Reason, possibly to dispel rumors of Grant's relationship with Randolph Scott. The wedding was the talk of Hollywood. Cary Grant, the dashing Englishman with a heart-melting smile, and Virginia Cherrill, the stunning starlet known for her role in City Lights, looked like the perfect couple. But behind the studio-approved headlines, their marriage was little more than a carefully curated illusion. Virginia had fallen for Cary's charm, his effortless wit, and his irresistible presence. But after the honeymoon glow faded, she noticed something strange. Cary was distant, polite, attentive in public but cold in private. He spent more time with his close friend and roommate Randolph Scott than he did with her. At first, she dismissed the whispers. "They're just good friends," she told herself. But the late nights, the secret meetings, and the way Cary always seemed more at ease with Randolph than with her, it gnawed at her. One evening, after another silent dinner, she finally asked, "Cary, do you even want to be married to me?" He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly combed hair. Virginia, I don't think I'm the man you want me to be. That was all she needed to hear. The divorce came swiftly, finalized just over a year after their wedding. The official reason: incompatibility. Hollywood moved on as it always did. Cary went back to his bachelor life with Rudolph, and Virginia found love elsewhere. But the rumors, they never really went away. 8. Cary Grant and Barbara Hutton, 1942 to 1945. Sham reason: a social arrangement rather than a love match. The wedding was a spectacle. The dashing leading man, Cary Grant, stood beside Barbara Hutton, one of the richest women in the world. The press called it a fairy tale. Hollywood royalty meeting actual royalty, as Hutton was an heiress to the Woolworth fortune. But behind the glamour something was missing. Cary had been reluctant at first. He was charming, sophisticated, but never one to chase wealth. I don't need her money, he had told a friend. But to the world it was perfect, her wealth, his charm. A match made in socialite heaven. Barbara, fragile from a lifetime of privilege but little love, clung to the idea of a husband who would adore her. First it seemed like Cary might be that man. He was kind, attentive, and shielded her from the vultures who only wanted her fortune. But love, that was something else entirely. They spent their days at lavish parties, posing for photographs, but at night their home was silent. Cary preferred solitude. Barbara sought affection he could not provide. Rumors swirled, whispers that he was in love with someone else, that his heart belonged elsewhere. One evening, after another strained dinner, Barbara sighed, swirling her wine glass. We were never really in love, were we? Cary looked at her. His usual charming smirk replaced with something softer. Pity, maybe. I care about you, Barbara, he admitted. But we were a picture, not a love story. By 1945, the illusion had cracked beyond repair. The divorce was quiet, amicable. No messy scandals, no dramatic fights. Just two people walking away from a script they no longer wanted to follow. Cary left with his dignity, Barbara with her fortune. Hollywood called it another failed romance. But those who knew them best knew the truth. There had never been a romance to fail. 9. James Dean and Pier Angeli, engaged in the 1950s, never married. James Dean and Pier Angeli, a love stolen by Hollywood. The church bells rang in the distance as James Dean sat alone on his motorcycle across the street. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, the smoke curling around him like a ghost. He was supposed to be the groom. Instead, he was the outsider, watching the love of his life marry another man. Inside the church, Pier Angeli stood at the altar, dressed in white, her delicate fingers laced in Vic Damones. Her lips curved into a smile, but her eyes searched the room, searched for him. James. They had been inseparable once, two young souls drawn together in a world that tried to control them. He was wild, reckless, and full of dreams. She was delicate, refined, and bound by family and tradition. They had whispered promises beneath the Hollywood sign, stolen kisses under moonlit skies. But the studio had other plans. He's dangerous for you, the executives warned her. He's unpredictable, a bad influence. Her mother agreed. James Dean was not the kind of man an Italian Catholic girl should marry. He was rebellious, defiant, a whisper away from scandal. Pier, James had pleaded, his voice raw with desperation. Don't let them tell you how to live. But in Hollywood, image was everything. Love was secondary. So she walked down the aisle to Vic Damone, her hand trembling in his. And James. He revved his engine, drowning out the sound of the vows that should have been his. As she kissed her husband, James Dean sped off into the California sunset. His heart shattered. 2 years later he was gone. forever frozen in time just like their love. And Pier, she would later confess. He was the only man I truly loved. But by then it was far too late. 10. Anthony Perkins and Barry Berenson, 1973 to 1992. Sham reason. Perkins had relationships with men before marrying Berenson, leading some to speculate the marriage was partly for public image. The sun cast a golden glow over Martha's Vineyard as Anthony Perkins stood at the altar. His usual nervous energy masked by a warm smile. Across from him, Barry Berenson, young, beautiful, and effortlessly elegant, gazed at him with devotion. It was a picture-perfect moment, the kind captured in glossy magazines, the kind that convinced the world love was simple. But love for Anthony had never been simple. He had spent years living in quiet fear, hiding the truth of who he was. In Hollywood, there were no leading men who could openly love other men, not without losing everything. He had tried therapy, prayed to be cured, even undergone electroshock treatments. Then came Barry. She was kind, understanding, and she loved him without conditions. She knew about his past. She had heard the whispers, knew the truth behind them, and still she stayed. Maybe this can work, he had told himself on their wedding day. For nearly 2 decades, they built a life together. They had 2 sons, shared laughter, vacations, quiet moments of comfort. And yet, in the silence, in the shadows, parts of Anthony still lived a life apart. There were whispers of secret rendezvous, of a loneliness Barry couldn't quite reach. One night she asked him softly, "Do you love me, Anthony?" He hesitated, then took her hand. "I do, Barry. In the best way I know how." It was enough. Or at least she made herself believe it was. In 1992, Anthony lost his battle with AIDS, and Barry never remarried. She spoke of him with fondness, with loyalty. Perhaps, in a way, their marriage had been real, not in the way Hollywood expected, but in the way only they could understand. And there you have it, another look behind the glitz and glamour of Hollywood's golden age. These marriages may have looked perfect on the outside, but behind closed doors, they were anything but. Some of these unions were for publicity, some were to protect careers, and some were never meant to last. But one thing's for sure, Hollywood has always been full of secrets. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's past, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Which celebrity marriage shocked you the most? Drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Stay tuned for more untold stories, right here on Globewise Entertainment.